Now, if you don't know anything about guns and I showed you this one right here, what would you say this gun is? You'd probably say it's a rifle, and you would be right. It's actually a 9mm carbine, but regardless, it is rifle length, rifle form, rifle shaped. And that's what we're going to be focused on today as I give you 7 guns that look like they're from outer space. When we look at modern guns, even predating World War I, we have a certain aesthetic that we keep in mind. And so whether it's rifle, pistol, or shotgun, most people are going to categorize it in one of those three. But there's some guns that are so crazy and so unorthodox that it's really hard to put a label on them unless you know what they actually are. And so that's what we're going to talk about today and showing you 7 of those crazy guns. And so if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here, gain access to some pretty cool perks, and support what we do, and so we can continue to do what we do. I really appreciate you guys. Let's go and get into it. Let me go ahead and preface this by saying that I know there will be 1 or 2 people, maybe 3, that come in here and say, oh, aesthetics means nothing. It's a tool designed to save your life. Reliability is king. And you'd be absolutely correct. We're just not talking about that, right? We're not, most of the firearms that I review on this channel have a practical use. And yes, they are tools for defensive purposes for sure. And of course, it goes a lot deeper than that as well when we're talking about the Second Amendment. But we're not focused on any of that stuff today. We're simply focused on guns that just look weird, but they still may have a practical purpose. Maybe they don't. I'll talk about that stuff along the way and what really makes each one of these guns stand out. So let me get this boring regular gun out of the way and let's bring in the first one. Now the first gun I want to start with is one of my absolute favorites, but there's no denying that the Luger P08 looks like it is from outer space, literally. But that's because it's patterned by the very first semi-auto, which was the Borchardt from like 1897. And so the Borchardt, if you've never seen one of those, I'd love to be able to just handle one, to be quite honest with you. But that thing looks even more alien-like. And I don't know. I can't predict the future, but if at some point I get my hands on that, that would make a great gun for this series. But just imagine the Borchardt. It almost looks like an octopus head on the back of it. It's like really long. And so George Luger came up with this design to improve upon the Borchardt pistol. Now the Luger was first adopted by the Swiss, then the German Navy, and then the German Army in 1908. And actually it went through U.S. trials as well. So the United States was looking for a .45 caliber pistol. They wanted to replace their .38 long Colt revolvers, and so George Luger had two .45 examples. And so even though they were satisfactory in the trials, there was a discrepancy in the ammo. So George Luger wanted a faster burning powder. He brought over 700 rounds of his ammo, and the gun ran great. It ran satisfactory according to the test. But I guess that ammo or that powder was hard to get. And because of the way this gun chambers, it's not under spring tension. So I guess they just didn't necessarily trust that these things would run as long as some of the other guns that were in competition. So of course, we kind of know how that worked out. In 1911, eventually won. It wasn't the 1911 then. They made some changes to it. John Moses Browning did. But regardless, there is a known serial number 2, I believe, because serial number 1 was either taken back or it was destroyed in the trial. Serial number 2 in .45 is actually out there somewhere in a private collection and valued at over $1 million, which is pretty freaking crazy. I'd love to be the one to find that. But regardless, man, these things were made from 1899 all the way until 1949. Actually, the Swiss carried this gun all the way up until 1949 when it was replaced by the SIG P210. But the biggest thing that makes this so odd looking is, of course, the toggle action. Now, of course, the magazine release is in a pretty familiar spot, But when you watch this thing in action, you can see how crazy it actually is because of this toggle link action. That's how the gun actually cycles. And then of course it ejects from the top as opposed to the side on modern handguns. Now you may be asking yourself, well, how's that thing to shoot? It seems like it would be a lot of recoil. It's actually one of the most accurate guns from this time period that I've shot. I think the most accurate one so far that I've shot is actually the high power, but this one is right up there. This thing shoots like a freaking dream. It's a different kind of recoil for sure, but this thing shoots really well. And of course, you know, sights back then just really kind of sucked. So you have very little contrast, but that's the way it is on all pistols. But another thing that you will notice is the angle at which the grip is. Now this one actually has one of the notches cut out here. You know, a lot of the pistols from back then had this notch because they would use a holster stock combo. Having SMGs just kind of made taking your regular sidearm and trying to turn it into a mini carbine of sorts, it was just impractical at that point. Now, of course, that practice went on even to modern day as far as trying to attach a stock to a pistol and have it deploy quickly. B&T has an example of that. But regardless, that's what that little notch back there is for. But when you look at that grip angle, you may think, man, that thing looks really wild. But to be quite honest with you, it is pretty comfortable and it's got a decent point of aim to it. There's a little bit of adjustment that's needed, but regardless, this thing shoots really freaking good. And of course, it kind of spawned the Ruger as a company with the Ruger standard pistol. So all in all, when it comes to pistol designs, there's no way I could make this video and not talk about the Luger because it is so wildly different. But man, this thing was in service for quite a long time, and yeah, they were more expensive. Yes, the Walther P38 actually ended up taking this gun's place, but it served in Wehrmacht as well. Some soldiers actually had these on their sides, and of course this was a common trophy piece for American soldiers as well. And so it's one of the most prized guns actually from that time period. But when you look at it, it is so wildly different and really freaking cool looking. And it's really cool that this gun still fires and shoots as good as it does. Now the next alien gun I want to talk about is truly one of the most unique PDWs out there, rifles out there that you can get. This is the Cris Vector. This one specifically is the SDPE enhanced. So it has this piece up here around the end of the barrel. We have a hand stop that's built in. I need to tighten that up, by the way. Picatinny rail, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock position. We have a folding charging handle right here that we can pull back, operate the gun just like that. It's kind of a short stroke, so it's a little bit more difficult to actually operate that bolt, but it is what it is. We have our magazine release right here, bolt release right here, boom, there we go. And then these shells obviously come out from this side. Safety selector back here, you can see we have our pistol grip, and all in all, it is just a really crazy design, and that's mainly because of this area in here. And so the body right here is actually what helps to mitigate recoil. So every rifle pretty much that's ever been made, besides the Cris Vector, and there may be others that I just don't know about, but most of them, the bolt comes back after you fire a round straight into the shooter's hand. Well, on this one, the bolt actually comes back a little ways, and then there's a spring in here where it actually, in a linkage, where it actually goes downwards to keep that recoil as little as possible. Some of their variants, they were able to get these things, full auto ones, at like 1,500 rounds per minute. They actually had to lower that to 1,200 rounds per minute. Now they have these in a variety of different calibers, 9mm, 40, 45, and 10mm. This one's in 45. And the recoil for sure is very light considering the round. Now the gun is actually pretty heavy for what it is, but again, you have an extra, an extra design in here, extra linkages and springs. So you're going to add a little bit of weight and a little bit of bulk to that. But I think overall, it is a really awesome design. Another thing that I notice is, sometimes with these PDWs, their overall short nature is really good for a lot of things, except when you go to actually hold them. And so one thing you could do is you can kind of, let's try to get that sling out of the way, so you can kind of grip it right down here against the front of the body. You just got to make sure you don't hit that mag release. If you hold it right in here, that last shot, the bolt hold open is going to do its job. It's going to come out super quickly. It's going to pinch your hand, super uncomfortable. Of course, we could hold up here, but I think I'm going to move this hand stop maybe back just a little bit, and then maybe tuck it somewhere up in there. I don't know. It gets a little more difficult, again, the shorter the design we have. I don't like to be way out here just because your finger is so close to the end of the muzzle. But for what this thing is designed to do in mitigating recoil, that Super V system is super impressive, and this thing definitely has a different design because of it, and there's not really a lot that looks like this, if anything at all. Well, just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder after the Cris Vector, I'm going to drop another one on you. This is the Springfield Armory Helen rifle. Now, this is better known in other parts of the world, especially Croatia, which is where these guns are derived from, as the VHS-2. Here in America, they're under the Springfield Armory name, and so we call them the Helen. You have them in 16, 18, and 20-inch barrel variants. And there's a number of different things that make this gun unique. Your charging handle actually lays parallel with the upper receiver, right? And then once you're ready to deploy it, it will actually push out either to the left or the right side of the gun, so making it fully ambidextrous. And then whenever you're done using it, it will lay back down in its position. So it's actually pretty handy. It doesn't stick out, lays in there pretty flush. And then of course the upper rail right here, you have some space in between that. Of course you kind of need that so you have room to operate the charging handle, but it kind of looks like the FAMAS rifle, which is, another popular type of design, another popular bullpup, I should say. And it definitely does take some inspiration from that. We have integrated backup sights that again lay flush on the top of the receiver. They are spring activated. You press the button, boom, they will fall back down. We have M-lock slots on the side. We have Picatinny underneath. We have some QD slots here for our sling if you want to put that on there. Safety selector, BCM, gunfighter grip, all of that good stuff. We actually have an adjustable stock back here in the rear. Now what makes these guns different is the action is in the rear. Most traditional rifles, it's going to be forward of the pistol grip, and in return it's going to make it a lot longer. Now the trade-off here is you get a bullpup design with a 16-inch barrel, or even an 18-inch barrel, or 20-inch in the Helen's case. That's going to be typically a lot shorter in profile than what a traditional rifle would be. But you're also going to get more weight with the bullpup rifle compared to traditional guns as well. Now, because that weight is centered more towards the rear, they're actually really well balanced when it comes to doing this one-handed manipulations. If this hand needs to be free, it is a heck of a lot easier to manipulate this gun one-handed than it ever would be for a traditional rifle. So in that sense, it actually is pretty good, and they are balanced well. Now, I wouldn't say this is the best balanced bullpup rifle. I kind of reserve that for the X95, but I really like this gun. I think they did a lot of awesome features. It has a pretty decent trigger in it. One of the better bullpup triggers, because typically with these guns you don't get a really good trigger, but with this one, it's pretty decent. And overall, a very unique design as well. Something that a lot of people will look at and be like, man, what the heck is that thing? You know, your bolt release, your magazine release is back here in the rear. Then the rest of your controls, safety selector, pistol grip, trigger, all of that, of course, is in a familiar spot. So it's one of those guns, some people are very adamant about not going to, especially for a self-defense rifle, because they're not used to the battery of arms. But I can assure you that if you get used to the battery of arms on a bullpup rifle, they are super convenient and just not only a very good practical home defense option because of their overall short length, but also a proven design in other parts of the world where these things have actually been deployed. So overall, the Helen is definitely a different gun altogether, but it's not the only bullpup that's actually going to show up on this list. And no, the other bullpup is not the X95. It's actually the Metat Tactical. PCCs and PDWs come in a variety of different shapes and sizes, as we've already seen one before, but there's a lot of just regular PDWs out there and PCCs, you know, that either operate like an AR, or maybe they have a side charging handle, whatever. But this is one that actually utilizes a gun that's already in your collection. And that is a number of different pistols, very popular pistols that they offer these for. Now, I specifically have one for the M&P here, and essentially what you have is you take your pistol, right? You replace your stock barrel with the 16-inch barrel that they provide, and then you close this right here, and you lock down the trigger right there, and boom. Now you've turned your pistol into a PCC. You have an adjustable length of pull right there. You actually have your magazine release is ambidextrous right there. Magazines are going to go in the same pistol grip that your pistol already utilizes, which is pretty nice. And then we have a cross bolt style safety that is right behind the trigger. That trigger, by the way, is actually attached to a bar that will allow you to use the same trigger pull that your pistol already has. We have an ambidextrous charging handle right here, and then a variety of different accessories. So what I have on here is very simple. I have a thumb rest and then a hand stop underneath. Of course, we have M-lock, 3, 6, 9 o'clock position, Picatinny rail on the top. We also have a threaded barrel, and again, there's a number of accessories that you can run on this. Some of them have like what is pretty much a vertical grip on the front, but then it has a spot for another magazine. So you can do a quick mag swap and have 2 mags on the gun. Of course, again, we have that Picatinny rail up top and an overall very unique design. They have almost kind of like the shark nose cut, diagonal cut up here in the front. Definitely looks pretty wild, and that's why it's on this list. Plus the fact that you can just take your pistol and turn it into something like this is obviously pretty cool. Now these things are actually discounted through my channel as well, which is pretty awesome. So not only can you get a really cool piece for your pistol and turn it into a PCC and get some better accuracy out of it, a little better velocity out of it, but you can also get these things at a discount. And again, they come for a wide variety of popular pistols that are out there and a wide variety of colors. But make no mistake about it, these things actually do and can serve a purpose. Especially one thing that I found is if you are training somebody and they are sensitive to recoil of just a pistol, you could take your factory pistol, turn it into something like this, and make it a lot easier for them to learn on. If it's a home defense type of situation, this again could be a good platform for that. And simply a good training and a pretty fun plinking tool at the same time. Now, while the Metat Tactical Apex is a pretty cool design, it's not unique in taking a pistol, a traditional pistol, and turning that into some sort of carbine. One of the most popular guns, probably the most popular gun to do that, is the C96 Mauser. Now, on its own, let's just remove the stock holster combo here for a minute. This thing is freaking weird. You have an internal box magazine. You have a fairly long barrel, which is pretty much fixed in place. It's not gonna move back like a tilting action. We have a hammer back here, and then we actually have our slide is right there. We have our extractor on the top, so that's where your shells are going to kick out, and of course that's where you load as well. And they call these things the broom handle because the handle looks like a broom handle. So there you go. And these things were designed in the late 1800s. And while other guns saw favor more than these, specifically, you know, your Lugers, your 1911s, eventually your Walther P38s, and guns like that, these things still remained in service all the way through the end of World War II, but especially in World War I. And again, we have our wooden holster here, and we could turn these things into a little carbine. Even though the Mauser C96 is probably the most popular gun to have this type of setup, they were used all the way back in the flintlock days, and even up to current times, things like the Metat Tactical. B&T has their own full-size pistol that has a quick deploy stock attached to the side of that. So this is not a design that's going away anytime soon. You have the little, what are they, the Ronins or the Ronis that are designed for Glock pistols as well. So people have always been trying to get more out of their pistols when the situation calls for it, and by far this is probably the most popular example. And I'll be honest with you, if I had to carry this as a holster and use it for that purpose, absolutely not. That would suck. But using it as a little carbine, this thing is actually super comfortable to shoot, and I find that the C96 is actually pretty accurate as well. It's almost like George Luger actually designed, you know, the Borchardt and then the C96 and then the Luger itself. All of these guys were trying to figure out this whole semi-auto thing, and this was one of the designs they came out with. Wasn't the most popular one, but definitely one of the most popular ones to utilize a stock holster combo. Now the next alien gun that I want to talk about here is actually one I've never shot, but I have handled a couple of them, and that is the FNP90. And especially considering when these guns came out, which was in the 80s, they definitely looked like alien guns back then, considering everything else that was out. Now, FN came up with this design in response to NATO, who wanted to get past the 9mm. They wanted something that was going to be more accurate, something that would go through body armor, and they had quite a few specifications that they wanted for the rifle. They wanted the rifle and a pistol. They wanted the rifle to be under, 6.6 pounds. They wanted the pistol to be under 2.2 pounds, but ideally 1.5 pounds. Both the rifle and the pistol had to hold 20 rounds, and they had to be easily deployable from a cockpit or a sitting position, close quarters type of firearms. And so that's where the P90 and the FN57 came about. Cool bit of information about the 57 is it actually went up against Heckler & Koch's 4.6 by 30mm in 2002 and 2003. This was another NATO test where they wanted to standardize either the 5.7 by 28 or that 4.6 by 30 to kind of phase out 9 by 19 for PDWs. Well, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and I believe France said that the 5.7 by 28 was superior to Heckler & Koch's round, and of course Heckler & Koch being in Germany, Germany turned that down. So the 5.7 by 28 could have been standardized at that point, but Germany, like I said, they said, yeah, no, we don't agree with your results, and because of that, neither the 4.6 by 30 or the 5.7 by 28 ever became standardized, and that's kind of why it's been considered like a niche round, but you can't really call it that either because it's been adopted independently by 40 nations, and there's over 200 law enforcement divisions that actually have the P90 including Secret Service. But it actually feeds from a 50-round box magazine on the top. It has a very short overall length. You have a big thumb hole where a pistol grip would normally be. Of course, you have a safety selector that's right under the trigger. It is just a really wild design. And then in 2005, that's when FN actually came out with the civilian version, which is the PS90. And of course, they're fairly popular, I would say, on the civilian market here in the United States. But definitely a gun that could have been a lot bigger. Not only just that gun, but 5.7 in general could have really taken off if it hadn't been for the Germans turning down that test. And I mean, I assume that's just kind of natural. I mean, they wanted their round to win and to be standardized. But regardless, it's still, you know, kind of kept up. It's still there. I mean, it's a very expensive round, comparatively speaking, to 9, and of course 9 has had a resurgence now for well over a decade. A lot of law enforcement agencies are switching from 40 back over to 9. But still, 5.7, a lot of companies still continue to make 5.7 guns. New 5.7s seem to come out every single year, and with that, I don't see 5.7 going away anytime soon, that's for sure. But also, unless there's more companies that continue to make them and more ammo production, then the price is gonna be higher than 9mm, probably indefinitely. And I don't ever see 5.7 taking the place of 9, but hey, maybe it will in the future, but I just don't see it happening at this point. But the FN P90 is definitely one of those unique guns that looks like it's from outer space. And the last gun I want to talk about is a really interesting bullpup, chambered in .308, and probably the only Kel-Tec up to this point that I actually like, and that is the RFB. I had a chance to shoot a buddy of mine's rifle, and I gotta say, for its overall length, design, weight, the thing actually handles the .308 round really well. Now, I wouldn't have even brought this gun up if it wasn't for the way it ejected. So essentially you have, you know, dual extractors, and then you have a tube, a slide, a chute, whatever you want to call it, where your rounds will actually spit out the front of the gun. Sometimes you'll have one kind of poop out at a time. Sometimes you'll have 4 or 5 shoot out of there, and it's a really, really unique system. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I actually trusted it until I used it, and I had 0 problems with the thing. And it made cleaning up brass a heck of a lot easier than any side ejection rifle that I've ever held. Other than that, like I said, it handled .308 round very well. Has an amazing trigger, especially for a bullpup, and overall, I was very impressed with the gun. Now, it actually takes the FN FAL mags, and while it's not as soft shooting as the FAL, in my opinion, it still handles the .308 round really well. Again, there's other .308s. I talked about this in my 7 best .308 video. There's other .308s that are softer shooting, but I was very impressed with how well the RFB handled trigger, and that forward ejection is actually really freaking cool. And so those are 7 guns that look like they're from outer space. They're alien guns. And of course, there's actually quite a few more guns that I have in my mind that I could put in a list like this. And so if you guys like this video, let me know by liking it. And of course, if you like what I do, consider subscribing, join us on Patreon, or join the channel right here and become a part of the SHOT team. And if you want to support what we do, that's the best way to do it. Big thanks to you guys for watching. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.